Good morning. As of yesterday, Baltimore City had 15,309 reported cases, 85 people hospitalized with COVID-19, and we're still at 436 deaths. I'm up here every week to ensure our residents have the most up-to-date and accurate information so they in turn can make smart and informed decisions for themselves and their families. We remain focused on continuing to scale up our response to this emergency to ensure residents of our city have the resources and support they need at this time, while continuing to leverage the wealth of medical and public health here in Baltimore. I want to remind residents of the invaluable resources available at coronavirus.baltimorecity.gov. There, residents can find real-time data for Baltimore City as well as locations for where they can get tested. We're still in a pandemic, one that's built to spread rapidly in large groups. I know people are not looking to catch COVID, but it's looking for you. The coronavirus pandemic hasn't gone anywhere, but we know what we need to do. Wear a mask when out in public, watch your distance to others, and wash your hands often. Again, I want to thank the majority of Baltimoreans who have heeded the warnings and followed the guidance. And as always, we will continue to monitor the data daily. Now I would ask Baltimore City Health Commissioner Letitia DeRosa to update you on our COVID response and how we are supporting residents and families in our city.
Good morning, and thank you, Mayor Young, for your continued leadership during this public health crisis. Briefly, I'd like to give a few updates related to the coronavirus pandemic. We've seen improvement in our trends, including a reduction in the average number of cases per day from a peak of 159 on August 1st to 64 based on today's data. Additionally, our current positivity is 2.7%, which sits below the state's overall positivity of 3.6%. Our current case rate per 100,000 residents is 8.1%, compared to the state's overall case rate of 8.89. Despite these improvements, we remain focused and concerned with the high chance of disease transmission associated with large social gatherings, such as parties, weddings, cookouts, and other celebrations. These settings, where a combination of factors, including relaxed social distancing, improper or absent use of face coverings, and being around others for extended periods of time, can elevate the risk of COVID exposure and transmission. We are encouraged by the data, but please don't let your guard down. Coronavirus remains a threat to the health and well-being of all Baltimore City residents. Testing for coronavirus remains at the crux of our response. It is vital for those who believe they have been exposed to a confirmed case of COVID-19, have experienced any symptoms of COVID-19, or have been going out frequently and have been in close contact with others outside of their home to get tested. Asymptomatic individuals can unknowingly infect others. If you're concerned you may have contracted COVID-19, even if you aren't yet showing symptoms, please get tested to ensure peace of mind or to determine if isolation is needed. The city has been supporting community testing since April, launching our very first testing site at Pimlico. We're appreciative of the support we've received from the Maryland Jockey Club and the Stronach Group to perform testing there. Due to Preakness, our Pimlico testing site will be temporarily shutting down beginning next week. We will still continue to provide testing through our mobile testing sites. And for the most up-to-date locations, please visit coronavirus.baltimorecity.gov or follow the health department on social media. With flu season coming up, this is also a time to consider when and where you'll be getting your flu shot. At the health department, we're working to achieve a 100% vaccination rate for all of our staff. We will also be launching a new citywide public health campaign promoting vaccination in the weeks to come. In the meantime, I strongly encourage everyone, barring any medical or religious exemption, get vaccinated against the flu. It's safe, proven effective, and can reduce your risk of contracting the flu this season. Visit our website, health.baltimorecity.gov/flu, to find out where you can get your flu shot. Lastly, I'd like to remind all city residents to continue to socially distance when around those not in your household, to wear your face cloth covering over your nose and your mouth when you're in public spaces, and to wash your hands frequently. Continued practice of these protective measures will reduce transmission of COVID-19 and flu in our city and enable us to continue lifting restrictions and reopening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zavasa. Next, I know the summer sports season came to a conclusion yesterday, and a couple of weeks ago, I said that the Health Department and Baltimore City Recreation and Parks will meet to reevaluate the data and make recommendations for fall sports. They have met, evaluated the data, and even incorporated the guidance released late last week from the state. Today, we are now confident to permit and provide youth sports leagues this fall, with the exception of tackle football, rugby, and wrestling. In addition to youth athletic sports, we are now offering park and pavilion permits for private events at 25% capacity in each space with a maximum attendance of 63 participants per event. Now I'll have the Director of Recreation and Parks, Reginald Moore, to come out to provide more details.
Good morning. Thank you, Mayor Young, for your continued support of our agency. Also, I want to thank Dr. DeRosa and her team as we deliberated what was the next steps for fall sports, and we came to the conclusion that we are here today to present. As the city's leading provider in recreation, it is one of our many priorities to keep our youth safe. With that being said, now that Baltimore has entered, or Baltimore is in a downward trend in the pandemic, we will allow youth athletic permits, with the exception, as the mayor stated earlier, for football, rugby, and wrestling beginning today. One of our main purposes is to make sure that the city of Baltimore is playful and active. Our goal is to make sure Baltimore's youth are safe and engaged. We're thankful that our residents has been understanding as we've modified and changed our services throughout the pandemic. From pools to be more summer fun sites and now student learning centers, we're working hard to create recreation with the health and safety of our residents at the forefront of our mind. Remember that it will take all of us to keep working together to keep everyone safe. We urge league organizers, parents, coaches, and our staff to be driving forces behind a safe and successful fall season. I want to highlight 3 key components that you'll be able to find more information on our website when it comes to the guidelines for fall sports. Number 1, the top priority, all youth that participate in a fall sport, coaches, and officials, anyone that's in the play competition area must have a mask on at all times. No exceptions will be allowed. Second, as we continue to make sure that we offer and open sports in a safe manner, we're only going to allow up to 2 spectators to attend a competition with each of the participants, and also to stress to those spectators that during this time that you properly social distance. If you can't social distance, that you make sure that you're wearing a mask as well. And then the third piece is that there has to be a written plan from each one of our fall organizations before we'll be allowing them to extend a permit, which should include their guidelines and making sure that we can enforce all the regulations by the CDC, our state, local, and health professionals. So we're encouraged, but I have to close by saying, in order for us to continue through fall sports, it will take all of us. It will take our league organizers, our parents, and our coaches of abiding by these rules so that we can continue to make sure that we trend downward and that we don't become instead of being part of a solution, we become part of a problem with this pandemic. Again, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Dr. DeRosa.
Thank you, Reggie. Next, at the Board of Estimates today, the city closed out our fiscal 2020 budget. I've asked our Budget Director, Bob Simone, to come and provide details on this action, and he will come at this time.
Hi, good morning, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this morning, the Board of Estimates took action to close out the fiscal 2020 budget year, and I wanted to provide an update on where we ended up. So as we've said before in this setting, the fiscal 20 budget with COVID-19 was really the perfect storm of budget issues. We had a situation where we were experiencing declining revenue while we were also requiring additional costs to respond to the pandemic. So back in the spring, in the early stages of COVID, we had announced that we were projecting a $42.3 million general fund deficit if we took no further action. And since then, with the mayor's guidance and support, we took some aggressive actions to try to minimize our costs. So we put in place a hiring and spending freeze on non-COVID, non-essential spending, and that did successfully slow those costs in the fourth quarter of fiscal 2020. On the revenue side, we had a rough April and May as expected. So, we had lower hotel tax and parking revenues, convention center income, all those revenues that are dependent on business activity. We did see a slight uptick in June, which is good news. We started to see some increased activity, and that also helped us in the fourth quarter. We ended with a net deficit in the general fund of $14.3 million. And as the mayor mentioned, we asked and got approval from the board today to use up to $25 million pending any final adjustments to balance out the fiscal 2020 budget in balance. We only use the rainy day fund in a time of emergency. We have built up the reserves over 2 decades to get to the point where we felt confident that we had enough to cover an emergency like this. So we think the system has worked. We're using the money now, and we're hoping that going forward we won't have to dip in further in future years. There's still a lot of risk in fiscal 2021, which is the year we're in now, but I can assure folks that we're taking every action still to minimize non-essential expenses while we make sure we respond appropriately to the pandemic and use any federal aid that's available to keep us on track. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Now that all of the business is out of the way, we can turn to some positive news for today. Today, I'm excited to join the Baltimore Health Corps to announce the addition of 10 new partnerships, totaling over $2.6 million to help support the Baltimore Health Corps operation. Back at the beginning of June, we announced the launch of the Baltimore Health Corps, and that this new initiative would be recruiting, training, and employing more than 300 residents who are currently jobless during this pandemic to serve as contact tracers and care coordinators for Baltimore City residents. Health Corps staff will be deployed to address critical COVID-19 needs in Baltimore's most vulnerable communities, performing 3 key functions: contact tracing, public health education outreach, and care coordination and social support. We have continued to receive strong support from local and national philanthropic organizations since the program's launch. Post-launch contributions were led by an additional $1 million of support from the Rockefeller Foundation Health Program, $500,000 from the Bank of America, $250,000 each from the Able Foundation and the Baltimore Ravens, and $200,000 from the Harry and Jeanette Weinberg Foundation. Other organizations that have contributed since the launch are the Department of Labor's Displaced Worker Grant, the Hoffberger Foundation, the Jacob and Hilda Blaustein Foundation, Kaiser Permanente, Baltimore Gas and Electric, and the COVID-19 Evolving Community Needs Fund at the Baltimore Community Foundation. The Baltimore Health Corps also received in-kind contribution from Indeed.com to support the recruitment process. In total, the Baltimore Health Corps has raised $3 million through its partnership with the Rockefeller Foundation, $2.1 million through local institutions, nearly $1.5 million through other national institutions, and the city has also allocated $4.5 million of federal funding through the CARES Act. In total, the program has raised over $11 million for the Baltimore Corps and has about $1.4 million to go. Since the launch, the city has received over 6,697 applicants from 4,079 applicants, of which 139 has accepted the offer and 73 have already started. Every staff receives employment development support, training, legal and behavioral services, and a stipend to purchase health care. And I'll invite our health commissioner back up to talk about the Baltimore Corps. And after we hear from her, the director of the Workforce Development Program at the Mayor's Office of Employment Development, Mackenzie Garvin.
The Baltimore Health Corps Initiative remains a shining example of what public-private partnerships should be. Born out of necessity and a shared desire to reduce the impact of novel coronavirus on Baltimore City residents, we are grateful and proud of our partners and the impact their assistance has had on our local public health response to the COVID-19 pandemic. With our partners' help, we are able to more effectively reach those who've been confirmed to be COVID-19 positive, provide medical advice, care coordination and support, thus limiting the further spread of coronavirus, all the while employing dozens of city residents. This pandemic has tested all of us. Like many other city agencies, the health department has been operating at maximum capacity for months. The additional support being brought on provides tremendous relief to our current workforce, many of whom have worked very long hours through weekends and holidays since the pandemic began. We are appreciative of the help as we continue to lead the city's COVID response. Now I'd like to introduce Mackenzie Garvin, Director of Workforce Development at the Mayor's Office of Employment Development, to talk more about this partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Young and Dr. Duraza, for your leadership and partnership in this critical initiative for our city. As we all know, we're in the midst of both a health crisis and an employment crisis that has resulted in many thousands of our residents losing their jobs. This initiative meets the dual purpose of helping to make our city safer and offering residents the opportunity to go to work in one of our city's most important and growing industries. Already, 140 have been hired by Baltimore Health Corps in a wide variety of jobs, most notably contact tracing, and we are on our way to providing 300 opportunities to residents. I want to thank and recognize our partner in all things employment, James Repkowski, the Assistant Secretary for the Division of Workforce Development and Adult Learning with the State's Department of Labor. Their grant, along with the resources provided by many other investors, supported training by the Baltimore Alliance for Careers in Healthcare that provides access to jobs for residents who may not have experience in the sector. I also want to note that all workers are receiving supports they need to succeed on the job, but to be prepared for employment opportunities beyond this initiative. These supports include, but are not limited to, career navigation, financial empowerment, which is provided by our agency, the Mayor's Office of Employment Development, but also legal services provided by the Maryland Volunteer Lawyer Service and the behavioral health assistance offered by Catholic Charities. We're excited to not only make a difference in controlling the spread of COVID and offer employment to hundreds of residents, but also demonstrate the impact that a transitional work model, first implemented by FDR's New Deal, can make, increasing employment and stimulating our economy and making our city stronger. Anyone interested in joining the Baltimore Health Corps can apply at www.baltimorecorps.org. More generally, if you're out of work and just want to explore your options, you can visit our job board at health.baltimorecity.gowflu. These jobs are on the homepage, but at the top there's also a link to our board that has another 300 jobs in a variety of industries listed. Note that the name of our team members are listed in the opening of the jobs to help you through the application process. Again, thank you, Mayor Young, Dr. Duraza, for your support and for your leadership.
Thank you, Mackenzie, for that. Really, really appreciate it. Also, I'd like to thank the Mayor's Office of Performance and Innovation. Did you have anything to say? Okay. All righty. Now we'll take a few questions.
Could we get a little more detail on what is forcing the dipping into the rainy day fund, considering many of the expenses are reimbursable, am I correct, from the CARES Act? But what has happened in terms of the spending over the past 5 months and the revenue? I understand about the tourism, but what is forcing this dipping into this fund?
Come on, Bob.
Can
You
you go
got to come up
yeah.
here.
So we had, as we had said, a sharp decline in revenue in the fourth quarter for the taxes that I mentioned. Hotel tax, convention center income, admissions and amusement tax, parking-related revenues were all down in the fourth quarter. So we had a revenue shortfall. We also had incremental expenses to respond to COVID. On the COVID expenses, those have not been reimbursed yet. We do think we will be reimbursed for a lot of those funds, either through FEMA aid or the CARES Act, but we haven't gotten that money from FEMA yet. We're going to apply for it, so we had to dip into the rainy day fund to balance now, and we're seeking reimbursement for those expenses.
And just to follow up what you said both at the board and just said again about the, quote, enormous risk for FY21, I mean, what exactly are you thinking at this point in terms of the revenue going forward?
So in the fiscal 21 budget, if you remember, we had forecast that we would have a quarter of a really shut down situation, the first quarter of fiscal 21. That hasn't played out since we've been starting to reopen, but I think there's still risk with the pandemic as we get into, of course, the fall and the winter. So far, July and August revenues have looked okay, but we still have risk at the end of this fiscal year just because we're in such an uncertain situation.
Mayor Young, can you talk about the surge in violence we've been seeing in the city with more than 50 people shot in 8 days, 14 or more of them have been killed, including a 14-year-old boy. What are your thoughts on what's being done? What can the city do? Do we need to seek help from the state? What are you doing?
Well, violence in the city and murders in the city is something that troubles me deeply, like it should trouble you and anybody else in the city of Baltimore who work, live, and play here. But I'll defer to the commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The police department is constantly adjusting, analyzing, and adjusting our deployment strategies to make sure, number one, officers are in place and where we're supposed to be based on data, and that is happening. And what we're seeing is, and this happened last weekend, there are a large number of victims, but it's not the same number of incidents. There were quite a few incidents that had multiple victims. For example, that Friday was a quintuple shooting involving a dice game. That Saturday was a quadruple shooting involving a dice game. And then there were several other shootings where there were 2 or 3 people shot and or killed. So we're working to make sure that, number one, we can be where we need to be to prevent it, and then are working to identify those people to hold them accountable. What we need is community help to help identify these people, because in many, if not most of them, people were out there and saw what happened. And we really need members of our community to help us identify these bad actors who are causing harm and killing our people, and we need to solve these cases. But we're working with our state partners, with our federal partners. I've been in constant contact with our state agencies, with our federal law enforcement agencies, and our U.S. Attorney, talking about how we can be more strategic in, number one, preventing crime and identifying who committed these. One of those shootings and murders we actually have an arrest on. It was a neighborhood dispute between 2 people in the neighborhood. And fast forward to this weekend, yet another dice game in Federal Hill Park. We believe the victim was somehow engaged with either members of a dice game, people who were participating in a dice game that led to a shooting and a murder. So those are things we're working on, but we need information about those dice games, and when people see them, please call us and tell us so that we can come solve those issues before they turn violent.
Quick follow-up. Speaking of the Federal Hill incident, we saw that there was an issue with the 911 call. The caller was placed on hold. Mayor Young, what do you say about that, and are you working with the City Council to find some sort of solution to fix that?
I'll just defer to the chief, because 911 is very important for our citizens to call, and I want to make sure that when they call, they're getting the proper response from 911. So I'll defer to Chief Ford.
I just want to bring a little clarity to this issue. There was no issue, there was no problem with the 911 system. What occurs is when many people call, which one event may cause that, we've talked about this before, if a whole bunch of people see a wreck on the interstate, a whole lot of people call that incident. Consequently, people are put into queue. When they call in, they're put into order. We've already received the call. The call is already in the process of being dispatched, but your call still will be answered. It's put in the queue, and it's answered in order. And in fact, the automated recording tells you do not hang up, because your call will be answered. Many times people hang up and call right back, so it puts them further and further behind. When the event initially happened, the call was dispatched within 2 minutes of the call. The first arriving engine arrived, engine 2 arrived about 3 or 4 minutes later. The ambulance arrived soon after that. The call, for all practical purposes, the event occurred the way it should have.
Is there any way to change that queue system, or is that working effectively?
That's actually best practices in the country. That's normal.
Could the health commissioner please provide more specifics on the data and rationale behind the decision to permit youth sports?
So I'll also ask Director Moore to come up. What I'll say is from the beginning, Rec and Parks has been extremely responsible in how they've made decisions to provide city services, recognizing that we're still in the middle of a pandemic, but there's also a need for some form of athletic recreation, some form of support for our city residents. So Director Moore and I have had multiple conversations reviewing the data and where we are as a city. When we transitioned into our modified phase 2, which is where we are now, we had another discussion on, okay, what is the data telling us, and how can we use that data to safely make decisions around restarting youth sports, given that a number of other activities are beginning to become more allowable. So again, I want to actually commend Director Moore and his team for all the work and thought that they've put into planning this out very safely based on that guidance, as well as guidance that we've received from the state.
And Dr. DeRosa is correct that, but as we've made our decisions, we've constantly been in contact with the health department, looking at the data to help us decide. But also, as you start looking, if you recall, the governor created a return to sports commission that identifies certain sports that, as the state phases into phase 2, you can open back up, as well as if some parts of the states are entering in phase 3, so they're even going into more high-risk sports. So we use that information. We also had information we looked at from our U.S. Football organization, which is appointed by the NFL, to really home in on what was the best practice when it comes to the more high-risk sports like football, rugby, as well as wrestling. And what they suggest as an alternative is clearly no one should be playing tackle football right now, but the alternative was to go to a 7-on-7, which is all that information is on our website, so that we can give them some opportunities for those programs that are interested in some form of football.
And has the state been more responsive to requests from local governments about contact tracing data?
So the state continues to provide some data through COVID Link, which is the Salesforce platform that we're all using. And they have been hosting regular calls with our team to kind of go through and help us interpret the data. I think, part of it is that it's a newer platform, so we're still developing the appropriate data reports that can give us the information that we need, but they have been a bit more responsive.
Will the Health Corps program, will the city have ownership of all of that data so it can put together?
It's still technically the state's data, so because we're on the state's platform, COVID Link, it is still the state's data.
Last question. Mr. Mayor, many restaurant owners say they're struggling, and more say that they have to close unless the mayor does not expand the capacity. Can you speak to that?
Everybody is struggling all over the country.
Do you have any plans to adjust that, sir?
When the data suggests that we need to do something different, then we will do that.